Welcome to my channel. She was just the quiet clinic volunteer until chaos struck and lives hung by a thread. When paramedics froze, Dr. Lena Halvorsen revealed the truth. She wasn't just a medic, she was the ghost of shadow response. In a storm of blood, fire, and fear, she proved that courage doesn't retire, and skills don't wait for permission. Sirens wailed across the Ridgeway training zone as helicopters descended and paramedics flooded the ground, weaving through chaos with urgency and confusion. For lines were fumbled into arms, pressure bandages slipped on slick blood, and frantic voices tangled with broken radio signals. Amid the blur of uniforms and flashing lights, a woman knelt beside a soldier whose pulse was vanishing fast. She wore no tactical gear, just a simple blue pullover and faded jeans. Her chestnut hair was tied back in a no-nonsense braid. Nobody recognized her until she tore open the soldier's flak vest with surgical precision and, without a flicker of hesitation, jammed her hand into the wound to clamp a gushing artery. Pressure here. Now, get blood on standby and prep for evac, she ordered, voice firm and exact. One young medic stopped cold. That's her. That's Chief Halvorsen, whispered another. But she retired. Moved here last year. Said she was just helping with paperwork. Her name was Dr. Lena Halvorsen, 36, Norwegian-American. To most at the Ridgeway Community Clinic, she was the calm volunteer who quietly managed the backroom inventory, organized wound dressing kits, and occasionally ran vitals for walk-ins. They called her Doc Lena, but assumed she was some out-of-practice ER physician settling into small-town obscurity. They didn't know she had once been Chief Tactical Medic of the Navy's Shadow Response Unit, embedded with Tier 1 teams on off-the-books rescues, counter-terror missions, and the kind of nightmare assignments that didn't officially exist. For 12 years, Lena had been the person whispered about in the darkest corners of combat medicine. She'd led surgical teams under gunfire, resuscitated the already gone, and carried too many final words to count. But 3 years ago, she'd walked away. No announcement, no medal ceremony. She disappeared from the military's radar and reappeared in the sleepy mountain town of Wexley, population 11,000. There, she stocked gauze and educated teenagers on CPR. The new paramedics, fresh out of civilian academies, dismissed her. They joked in break rooms about her slow pace and outdated gear. She's probably just a nurse who got burned out. But she's only seen paper cuts and allergy rashes. She doesn't even carry a trauma bag. Lena never corrected them. To her, lives were lives, whether in an alley behind a Middle Eastern compound or on Main Street in Wexley. Life didn't care about context. Neither did death. But signs of her past were always there. Her eyes never lingered where they weren't needed. Her hands moved with unnerving accuracy. And when calls came in, Lena always arrived first, somehow already knowing the situation better than the dispatchers. She kept a worn trauma patch in her jacket pocket. Faded, torn at the edges. It bore the words, "Respond in 60, save 3," an unofficial motto from her old unit. One she hadn't forgotten. That morning, she'd been reorganizing expired saline bags in the clinic basement when the emergency alert hit her phone. Multi-victim incident at Fort Spalding's training range. Vehicle rollover during maneuvers. Soldiers injured. Some critical. As she grabbed her bag, something locked into place. The civilian shell cracked. Her breathing slowed. Focus narrowed. The muscle memory of battle returned before she hit the ignition. The SUV Lena drove wasn't outfitted like a typical responder's vehicle. It looked like a hand-me-down with a rusting bumper and a dent in the side door. But in its trunk sat gear most hospitals didn't even carry, specially packed for field trauma, including vascular clamps, advanced airway kits, and a roll-up surgical field unit. By the time she arrived at Fort Spalding, the chaos was already fully ignited. One armored personnel carrier had flipped during a night training op, tumbling off a ridge into a dry riverbed. Crushed metal twisted around broken limbs. For soldiers lay scattered, some motionless, some screaming. Local responders were overwhelmed. Civilian medics from Wexley's small emergency unit knelt in confusion around the wreckage. A pale young man was pumping CPR into a soldier with a chest wound, a lethal mistake that would only make the bleeding worse. Another responder was cutting away gear, uncertain what to prioritize. Lena parked halfway up the gravel slope, snatched her bag, and moved like a phantom through the chaos. Not running, just deliberate, fast, and scarily calm. "Ma'am, step back," shouted the incident commander. "This isn't active." She didn't stop. She didn't speak. She dropped beside the wounded soldier with the chest wound and pulled out trauma shears. The vest peeled away like wrapping paper under her grip. Within seconds, she had gauze packed deep, pressure exact, and her free hand reaching for a needle decompression kit. Left lungs collapsing. "Get me a seal. 18 gauge. You've got 40 seconds before he's unresponsive." The young medics froze. She looked up, eyes sharp. "You. Call for a medevac. You, oxygen mask. Now? You, he's tachycardic, priority 1. They obeyed. Not because they knew her, but because her presence left no room for questions. And that's when someone noticed. One of the medics, Marcus, the same one who'd mocked her a week ago, spotted the patch on her glove. Torn, but still legible. A coiled serpent wrapped around a red cross. The emblem of Navy Shadow Med. "Oh my God," he whispered. "That's a ghost medic patch." Someone else gasped. "You mean that thing from Basra?" The woman who? Lena didn't look up. She was already working on the second patient, guiding the crew with a speed that bordered on supernatural. She read pupils before they blew, anticipated seizures, called unseen internal injuries before monitors even caught on. The medic team followed her like rookies following a legend. She moved through triage with the kind of certainty that can't be taught, only survived. By the time the helicopters landed, the chaos had a rhythm. Patients were labeled, stabilized, and prepped. The team had shifted from panic to precise. Lena hadn't shouted. She'd simply acted, and they followed. As the wounded were loaded up, Marcus stood by her side, shaking his head. "You're not a volunteer," he said softly. "You're something else." She met his eyes, expression unreadable. "I was what they needed today." Behind them, the chopper lifted off, carrying 4 soldiers who, without her, would have been casualties on a training report. And for the first time since she'd left the field, Lena Halvorsen allowed herself a deep breath. Not because it was over, but because something inside her had quietly awakened. She hadn't stopped being a combat medic. She'd only been waiting for the moment when the world would need her again. The following morning, Ridgeway Medical Center buzzed like a stirred hornet's nest. Staff who once passed Lena with polite indifference now stared with uncertain awe. Rumors moved faster than test results. Marcus, Sarah, and Tom, the 3 medics from the crash site, had spent half the night in stunned reflection. Marcus in particular had gone home and started digging. A few keystrokes, a few favors pulled. He accessed a partial record, just fragments. But it was enough. Dr. Lena Halvorsen. Rank, Lieutenant Commander, Ret. Assignment, Navy Shadow Response Unit, Tier 1 Tactical Medicine. Decorations, redacted. Deployment history, redacted. Final note, classified. Tom, Ridgeway's emergency team leader, stood quietly in the break room when Lena arrived. He'd printed out what little they could find and folded it neatly in his hands. "You know we had to look," he said. Lena didn't flinch. She just nodded. "You found pieces. That's enough." Sarah entered next, holding her coffee like it might steady her nerves. "Why didn't you tell us? We could have learned from you." Lena glanced around the room. 3 medics who had, until yesterday, called her Supply Queen and Miss Gauze. They weren't mocking now. They were listening. "Because it wasn't about me," she said. "I came here to remember who I was before everything became triage and blood." Marcus spoke up, voice quieter than usual. "But yesterday that was the real you, wasn't it?" "No," Lena replied. "That was the part of me I thought I buried. The part that only wakes up when it has to." Tom finally opened the folded page. "This says you worked field ops for 12 years, including something called Operation Dustlight." Lena's eyes darkened for a moment. Dustlight was one of the final straws, the mission where they pulled her out of a bombing site with a collapsed lung, 3rd-degree burns, and 3 saved teammates at her back. "Dustlight taught me what I could survive," she said, "but also what I couldn't carry forever." Tom hesitated. "The soldier you saved at Spalding yesterday? He flatlined twice during surgery. The trauma surgeon said the only reason they had any chance at all was because someone packed his wound like they'd trained under fire." "He'll make it?" she asked. "Yeah, he's going to pull through." Lena exhaled, slowly, like the wind had returned to her lungs. The room was silent until Sarah finally asked, "So what now?" Lena looked at them each in turn. "Now, I help you become better medics. Not because of where I came from, but because lives deserve your best every time." From that day forward, the air around Ridgeway shifted. Lena's presence was no longer background noise. She had become something else, a quiet guardian, no longer in hiding. But not everyone approved. Later that week, a formal-looking envelope arrived from the Ridgeway Regional Health Authority. An internal review had been triggered, prompted by a report questioning the unauthorized medical leadership shown at the Fort Spalding incident. Someone had noticed, and someone wasn't happy. Lena sat across from a long table of officials in pressed suits, their badges and ties as stiff as their expressions. At the head sat Administrator Grant Kellerman, the man who ran Ridgeway's medical board like a cold bureaucracy. He tapped the folder with Lena's name on it. "Dr. Halvorsen, we've received concerning reports. Your actions at Fort Spalding, while apparently effective, circumvented official command structure and violated multiple field response protocols." Lena sat upright, hands calm, eyes steady. They were dying. "I did what I was trained to do." "You're not licensed in this region to perform advanced trauma interventions," another voice chimed in, a thin-lipped legal liaison named Maura Barnes. "Field medic or not, you overstepped." Lena didn't respond right away. She let the silence hang. "If I hadn't stepped in," she finally said, "for soldiers would be in body bags instead of recovery rooms." Kellerman frowned. "That's not the point, Dr. Halvorsen. We can't have volunteers freelancing in life-or-death situations. There are regulations. Orders." "I didn't ask to lead," she said evenly. "But the moment called for someone who knew what to do. I wasn't going to stand by while they died." A soft cough came from the corner of the room. Dr. Erin Marshall, the hospital's trauma director, had been listening quietly. Now she leaned forward. "I reviewed her fieldwork myself," she said. "I've never seen such precise wound stabilization. We barely had to adjust her interventions. The results speak for themselves." Kellerman bristled. "Dr. Marshall, this isn't about outcomes. It's about procedure." "No," she countered. "It's about lives. I don't care how clean your procedures are if the patients don't make it." Lena offered no defense. She didn't argue. She knew how these things worked. But before the board could continue, a knock came at the door. Marcus stepped in, his uniform still dusted with grime from a morning call. Behind him were Sarah and Tom. All three stood silently until Kellerman glared up. "This is a closed session." "We know," Marcus replied. "But we have something to say." Tom stepped forward. "Dr. Halvorsen didn't overstep. She saved us. All of us. We've run that scene a dozen times in our minds. None of us would have caught that artery in time. She did." Sarah added. "She didn't take over. She led when the rest of us froze. That isn't misconduct. That's what training is supposed to prepare us for, and we weren't ready. She was." The board stared. Marcus looked directly at Lena. "We didn't recognize what we had, but we do now." The moment stretched long. Finally, Administrator Kellerman closed the file and sighed. "This review is tabled," he said. "But Dr. Halvorsen, you'll be restricted to clinic duties until we finish a full investigation." Lena nodded once, stood, and walked out without looking back. Outside, the team followed her into the hallway. "You okay?" Sarah asked. Lena paused, exhaled. "They want rules. I only care about results." Tom smirked. "Then let's start training for better results." She turned to face them, surprised. "You still want me to teach?" "You don't need permission to lead us," Marcus said. "You already have." For the first time in years, Lena Halvorsen allowed herself a smile. Small, measured, but real. The system might not accept her methods, but her team had chosen her anyway. Lena never returned to the spotlight. She had no interest in titles or announcements. But the next few weeks revealed something even more powerful than official orders: quiet respect. The medics began to gather outside clinic hours. At first, it was informal, Marcus asking questions about vascular pressure, Sarah wanting to understand how Lena identified internal bleeds so fast, Tom pulling out field manuals and asking her to rewrite the parts that never made sense under fire. Lena didn't teach like an instructor. She didn't stand in front of a board. She simply walked them through real scenarios. She led them through simulations with gloves on and her sleeves rolled. No lectures, just precision. "This isn't about saving everyone," she said during one late-night session. It's about saving the one in front of you. Right then, that's all that matters. She showed them how to find bleeds without monitors, how to hear shock in a patient's breathing before the vitals caught up. She made them practice airway insertions until it was muscle memory, made them feel the difference between a safe compression and a fatal one. You don't get a redo in the field, she told Marcus as he fumbled a second pass at intubation. You get instinct, or you get a funeral. They worked harder than ever before, and they got better. Within a month, Ridgeway's emergency crew, once average at best, was now being cited in internal reports as exceptionally prepared, remarkably composed under pressure, and operationally above standard. No one outside their circle knew the truth. No administrator gave Lena credit. But when the calls came in, mass accidents, industrial incidents, even a shooting downtown, they handled it. They moved with her rhythms. They saw injuries like she did. After one particularly rough multi-casualty event, a fire captain pulled Tom aside and asked, "What changed with your team?" Tom only nodded toward the ambulance where Lena was cleaning gear, alone. She did. But Lena didn't notice the whispers growing, didn't see how her reputation was quietly rebuilding behind the scenes. She was too focused on preparing them for the next unknown, not just with technique, but with mindset. One night, under flickering fluorescent lights in the clinic garage, Sarah finally asked what they'd all wondered. "How do you stay so calm?" Lena was adjusting a training dummy's neck brace. She didn't look up. "Because panic never saved a life," she said. "Fear is information. Use it. Don't obey it." Marcus nodded slowly. "Is that how you survived all those missions?" Lena glanced up, a flicker of something unreadable in her expression. "No," she said. "I survived because when the shooting started, I remembered one thing." "What's that?" Tom asked. "I wasn't there to be a hero," she said. "I was there to make sure somebody got home." And in the silence that followed, her team understood something they hadn't before. She hadn't just saved lives. She'd carried them. A month passed. Then two. Lena's restriction from official emergency response quietly faded, not with ceremony, but with necessity. She was simply too effective, too needed. Her knowledge too deep to sideline. The change was subtle but clear. Her name began appearing on response logs. First as a consulting party, then as field advisor. Eventually, someone started tagging her as on-scene lead, even though no one made that call aloud. At the clinic, she remained just Doc Lena, sorting supplies, doing intake checks, suturing cuts. But paramedics now looked to her instinctively, checking her face before making tough calls. Nurses leaned in when she spoke. The receptionist started booking her for trauma rounds unofficially. One evening, after a particularly difficult pediatric incident, Marcus found her on the back steps of the clinic, staring into the dark, her shoulders tight. "That one got to you," he said gently. She didn't answer right away. "He was 5, she said, bleeding internally. His father didn't even know it was serious until I checked him." "You caught it fast," Marcus said. "You saved him." She looked at him, tired. "But it's not just the skill, Marcus. It's the weight of what happens if I don't." He sat beside her. "How do you carry it?" "I don't," she said quietly. "Not all the time. Some nights, it carries me." He nodded. There was nothing to say. The next day, Lena walked into the clinic and found something new on the bulletin board. A photo had been pinned up, one from the Fort Spalding rescue. She was kneeling in dust, her hand buried in a soldier's chest wound, eyes locked forward like she was in another world. Underneath it, someone had scrawled a note in Sharpie. "Chief Medic. No uniform required." Lena stared at it for a long moment. She hadn't worn a rank in years. But here it was again, reclaimed not by authority, but by action. Not because she wanted it, because she'd earned it. A few days later, Tom brought a proposal to her desk. "Regional trauma leadership wants someone to coordinate cross-agency response drills," he said. "They want you." Lena didn't even look up. "I'm not interested in titles." "It's not about the title," he replied. "It's about giving your knowledge to more people. You can shape how this region trains for the next decade." She was quiet for a while. "Then, they'll want structure. Protocols. Bureaucracy." Tom smiled. "They'll want you. However you come." Lena tapped the corner of the paper. "I'll help. But I don't want rank. I want results. People die when the job becomes about resumes." "Agreed," Tom said. She didn't sign anything. She didn't take a new badge. But the next time a multi-agency drill was announced, she was there, walking the line, correcting grip posture, rewriting evac flow, teaching crews how to think under fire without flinching. And in the middle of it all, she was just Lena, the quiet woman from Ridgeway. But those who watched her work saw the truth. She wasn't a civilian. She was a force. It was during a late fall thunderstorm when the next Real test came. The call was brief, garbled by the storm and half drowned in static. Bridge collapse, multiple vehicles, possible entrapments, no visibility. The county's usual rescue unit was already tied up on a warehouse fire. Ridgeway's medics were the only ones within 15 minutes. Lena was already out the door before anyone finished reading the alert. She drove straight into the downpour, her hazard lights blinking, the windshield wipers useless against the flood of rain. By the time they reached the broken span of the Osric Bridge, the scene looked like something out of a war zone. A cargo truck had jackknifed mid-crossing, crushing a minivan and collapsing part of the rail. Several cars had plunged into the river below. Everything was chaos. Flashing lights, screaming, steam rising off ruptured engines. Lena didn't pause. She ordered one team to the embankment with extraction gear, another to start lining up IVs, and the third to sweep for breath sounds inside the mangled van. Tom's voice cracked through the radio. "Lena, we're overwhelmed. We don't have enough hands." She answered without flinching. "Then we work faster. Prioritize movement over certainty. I'll triage." And she did, moving car to car, making instant calls. Triage red, yellow, dead. Save him first. That one's window of survival is 90 seconds. They had no idea how she kept track of it all. Not just the patients, but the personnel, the storm, the terrain, the gear levels. She was moving through the wreck like she'd memorized every angle. Then came the scream. Someone's under the bridge. Marcus ran to the edge, light scanning the water. Below, pinned beneath a support beam, a boy no older than 8 clung to the side of a half-submerged vehicle. Lena didn't ask. She just moved. Gear tossed. Boots in the river. She dove headfirst into the churning black water, slicing through it with practiced strokes. The current was brutal. The water was ice. But her hands didn't shake. She reached the child, wedged herself between debris and the collapsing wreck, and jammed a pressure wrap against his leg where the femoral artery had opened up like a hose. She didn't call for help. She just whispered to him, "You stay with me. You don't get to go. Not tonight." Tom later said the entire rescue hinged on those first 60 seconds. Without her, that artery would have emptied his blood into the water before anyone even reached him. They pulled both of them up with a winch, Lena still applying pressure, soaked and trembling but never letting go. At the hospital, the boy survived. The doctor on shift came into the ER bay and said, stunned, "Whoever stopped that bleeding saved his life." "She did," Marcus said, pointing to Lena. "She always does." Later that night, soaked and exhausted, Lena sat alone outside the clinic with her hands still bandaged from debris cuts. In her lap was the old, worn patch she kept in her pocket. 1 minute saves 3 lives. She ran her thumb over the faded thread. That phrase wasn't just a motto anymore. It was a promise she had kept. The boy from the river, Ethan McCall, age 8, was still in the ICU when local media got wind of the story. Word spread of a mysterious medic who dove into floodwaters and clamped an arterial bleed underwater. They wanted a name, a face, a quote. Lena refused all of it. She told the hospital PR officer, "This wasn't a photo op. It was survival. Leave it at that." But the story grew anyway. An unnamed first responder. A miracle save. A legend whispered between dispatch calls and breakroom benches. Inside the Ridgeway emergency network, Lena was no longer the quiet woman. She was the one you wanted when everything went wrong. Still, she didn't step forward. She kept showing up at 5 a.m., logging supply restocks, mentoring junior EMTs, and watching over the clinic's flu drive with the same quiet efficiency. But now, the eyes that once overlooked her began to see. Really see. One evening, Marcus approached her with a different look in his eyes, one not of admiration, but of concern. "You all right?" he asked. She didn't answer immediately. She was cleaning instruments, but her hands moved slower than usual. He waited, patient, the way she taught him. Finally, Lena spoke. "That boy, Ethan," she said. "He had the same look as one of my men in Kandahar. Same terror, same injury, different age, different place. but the fear was identical. Marcus nodded. You're remembering. I always remember, she said. That's the cost. The skills don't fade, but neither do the faces. He sat beside her. Do you regret it? Coming back into this? No, she said quietly. But I forgot how loud the silence gets afterward. They sat in silence for a while, until the intercom buzzed with another call. Car crash, 2 vehicles, multiple injuries. Rain-slick roads. 0 visibility. Without a word, Lena stood, wiped her hands, and picked up her kit. Marcus followed. That night, as they worked side by side stabilizing a woman who had gone headfirst through her windshield, Sarah looked over from the other vehicle and called out, Lena, we're losing pressure here. Lena didn't even blink. Reverse the flow. Elevate and push now. The pressure stabilized. The woman's pulse returned. After the call, Sarah approached her. You know, she said, you're not just teaching us how to save people. You're teaching us how to think in the fire. Lena offered her a quiet nod. That's the only place it matters. Later, alone in her small apartment, Lena sat on her couch with the lights off. She pulled out a stack of old letters, one from every soldier she had ever helped send home alive. She read one, then another, and when she reached the one from a man named Logan, she stopped. It was a single sentence. You never stopped the bleeding. You stopped time and gave me another chance. She folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and let out a long breath. She was never going to outrun the past. But maybe, just maybe, she was finally starting to carry it the right way. It was Tom who noticed it first, how Lena began walking a little slower some mornings. How her shoulders tensed just before she picked up the radio. She wasn't burning out. She was carrying too much. Her team could feel it. She never says no. Sarah murmured one morning after Lena had spent 9 straight hours in the ER. She acts like it's just habit, but I think she can't turn it off. Tom nodded. She's lived too long in go mode. She doesn't know how to rest. So they did something about it. That week, Ridgeway's emergency crew launched something new, the Halvorsen rotation. Every responder was cross-trained on Lena's methods. They created trauma simulations based on real cases she'd handled. They even assigned new team leads on small calls, forcing themselves to operate without her crutch. At first, Lena was skeptical. You don't need to imitate me, she told Marcus. We're not, he said. We're building off you. But you can't do this alone forever. She watched them, really watched. And she saw something she hadn't expected. They were good. Not just improved. Not just technically better. They were thinking like her. Anticipating like her. Acting with the calm, brutal clarity she had once believed was impossible to teach. It was working. One night, after a double rollover response, Marcus sat with her beside the ambulance bay. You know, he said, we talk about you when you're not around. She smirked. Gossip. More like reverence. I'm not a saint, Marcus. No, he said. You're something more useful. You're real. Lena looked away. I'm still just a medic. No, Marcus said. You're the reason we believe we can be more than average. For a long while, she said nothing. Then, I didn't think any of this would matter again. I buried it too deep. And yet, he said, look at what you built, without a title, without a command, just by being the quietest person in the room who knew what to do. Lena stood and stretched. You've all become better than I ever expected. Marcus smiled. We had the best. That night, as she walked home, Lena passed the clinic's back door where a new note had been pinned under her photo. It read, Fire lives in the quiet ones. The world just has to listen. She didn't take it down. She didn't add to it. But she looked at it for a long, long time. And for once, she let herself feel the quiet pride she never chased but always earned. Months passed. The weather shifted. But some things didn't change. Lena kept showing up. Quiet. Composed. Ruthless about preparation. Gentle with patients. Relentless with trainees. She never sought praise. She barely acknowledged the growing admiration among regional crews. But people noticed. Across Ridge County, her name passed through radios with quiet reverence. If Halvorsen's on scene, you've got a shot. Then, one chilly morning in December, came the call that would test everything. Regional explosion. Natural gas rupture. Civilian complex. Mass casualties. The nearest trauma teams were delayed by stormed-out roads. Ridgeway's crew was the only one within 20 minutes. The dispatch officer's voice trembled. It's bad. Really bad. Tom and Sarah loaded up without hesitation. Marcus grabbed the new trainees. Lena reached the back of the rig, zipped her bag, and looked at them all. Today, she said, we don't wait for perfect. We don't chase heroics. We keep each other upright, and we give them a chance. That's all. They arrived to smoke, screams, and a pile of fractured concrete swallowing entire families. Lena didn't pause. She took command, but didn't order. She directed, guided, created structure out of madness. She led them down broken staircases, into collapsed corridors. She crawled through metal beams to reach a pinned woman losing consciousness, her legs caught under a water heater. The moment she got there, she realized it wasn't just crushed trauma, it was internal bleeding. No evac in time, Sarah whispered through the comms. If we don't stabilize her here. We do it here, Lena said. Start in 4. Get pressure bags. We clamp and push. We hold her long enough to get her out. They did. One by one, people were pulled from that wreckage because Lena Halvorsen didn't panic. Because her team had learned to think like she did. Hours later, caked in ash and blood, Lena stood alone as the final patient was airlifted away. Tom approached her quietly. 16 lives, he said. You coordinated 16 field saves today. She stared at the sky. They saved them. I just showed them how. You going to keep pretending this doesn't matter? He asked. She looked at him. I'm not pretending. I'm remembering. He paused. Remembering what? That the most important things I've ever done, she said, happened when no one was keeping score. Weeks later, Lena finally allowed her name to be listed as a consultant for Ridgeway Regional Medical. No rank, no paycheck, just a name in small print on training manuals. When asked why she finally agreed, she said, because it's not about recognition. It's about readiness. At the clinic bulletin board, below the now familiar photo of her kneeling beside the wounded soldier months earlier, someone added a third note. She didn't come to lead. She came so others would never freeze when it mattered most. And beneath that, scrawled in a new hand, skills don't retire. Courage doesn't ask permission. Lena Halvorsen never went back to the uniform. But in every medic she trained, every life saved by hands she once guided, her legacy grew. Not as a title, not as a ghost from elite ranks, but as a quiet woman who never stopped answering the call when it mattered most.